Okay. How to keep your head when others are losing theirs. Well, here's one thing that's almost always overlooked when you consider things like this. Everybody's looking for the quick fix, like, how am I going to fix my business now because my business is falling apart? What do I need to do today to fix my business because of the challenge that I'm facing right now? Well, what I'm going to tell you is one of the most important and valuable things you can do to save your business today: be prepared ahead of time. I mean, think about what we do. And it's like when your house is burning down, you say, well, what should I do? How do I save my house? Well, there are certain things you can do. You can throw some water on it, but in a sense, it's too late. Contrast what we're talking about here with what happens with our retirement. We all know we're going to retire, or almost all of us will retire at some point in the future. And we know that at that particular time, we probably won't have income coming in like we have at this point in our lives. We also know that it will have expenses at that time, which might be more or less similar to what we have. Perhaps some may be lower, but some, like healthcare costs, might be even higher. And so what do? Well, we think about it ahead of time. We do a lot. And you can go online and you can see all kinds of calculators that'll say, how much money do you think you'll need in retirement? How many years away are you? Okay, here's how much you need to save today and every month going forward to be prepared for that. We do that a lot when it comes to retirement, and it's very easy to find tools and things like that. But when it comes to our small business, we don't have an easy, ready to go to kind of suite of tools to think about to just help us do what we need to do to plan ahead of time. But here's how you need to think ahead of time about your business to prepare yourself today for what's going to be happening 3 years down the line. Ask yourself, first of all, what needs to happen in my business, or where does my business need to be 2 years from today? And therefore, what do I need to be doing today to get myself there in time? It's a question we hardly ever take time to ask. In other words, we're generally not planning strategically. We're simply reacting to the fire in the moment. We spend 80% of our time putting out the fires or dealing with the issues that are in front of us today, and we ignore the stuff that's way out there in the future. And I guarantee you, by ignoring the stuff that's way out there in the future, you are going to pay for that later on when something happens that you don't anticipate. Now, of course, nobody could have anticipated COVID, so that's probably not a perfect example for us to use. But so many changes have been generated out of the COVID situation that we couldn't have anticipated. But in general, there's a lot that we could anticipate. And when we first start to experience COVID, there probably were some conclusions that we could come to. And perhaps some of us did take some action. Maybe some of us invested in Lysol wipes. Or maybe some of us invested in Zoom because we figured there'd be a big need for Zoom as we go forward, especially if it were to last for a significant period of time. But most of the time, none of us do any kind of specific strategic planning to plan today for where we need to be for 3 years today. So what's the difference between planning and strategic planning? Strategic planning means planning with a strategy. That requires a tremendous amount of careful, considered reflection. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this, and it can be complex, but you can also do it quite simply and give yourself some benefit that's going to pay off next time you find yourself facing headwinds a year down the line, 2 years down, 3 years down the line. First, consider working with a coach or a trusted advisor to help you with this. Sometimes it's hard to make the time for yourself. Simply having another person to meet with gives you some accountability to say, I need to have a meeting here. I need to prepare X, Y, Z. And working with a coach who can help you get out of your own head and add more to your thinking, or working with a trusted advisor who could be another agent. It could be somebody that you trust in the business a lot, somebody that thinks very thoughtfully about the business and maybe even comes at the business a little bit differently from you. These people could be very valuable additions to your ability to think about what's going ahead in the future. So consider tying yourself to somebody else, even in a very informal way, to talk about things that you need to talk about to prepare for possibilities. That's what the whole business of insurance is about: mitigating potential risk. We can mitigate potential risk by planning ahead, as well as seize potential opportunity. There's 3 fundamental things that you can consider at the very least. It can be much more complicated than this, but you can at least include in your strategic planning process: goals, market conditions, competition. That is, ask yourself, what are my goals 2 years down the line? Or what are my goals 1 year down the line? Or what are my goals 3 years down the line? You may have already done a lot of that work. It may already be clear to you. Great. That should be part of what's fitting into your strategic planning discussion: is where do I want to be just for my own personal reasons. Maybe I want to have this much money so I can send a kid to college, or maybe I want to buy a $3 million house myself, or I want to go cruising around the world, whatever it is. I have potential goals for my business. Those things stand as one point of this. Second, market conditions. What can we anticipate as potential market conditions a year or two from today? For example, we know where the rates are today. If you had to bet whether rates are going to be lower 2 years from today or higher than 2 years from today, which would you bet? Higher, absolutely. So what are you doing today to plan for higher rates 2 years from today? Because your clients are going to have to deal with it. Let's just say that they're 5%, 7%, 8%, who knows what they are by then. But your client will have to face that, and therefore you'll have to face that. So what are you doing today to face the eventuality, the likely possible eventuality that rates will be there then? What are you talking about with your business regarding this? How would it affect your business? How would it affect how you respond now? How might it change the market shift or something like that in a mix of clients or something? A lot of things to talk about when you talk only about market conditions, even something as simple as one piece of it, rates. Third, competition. Where's the competition headed? What kind of scenarios can you think about now as possibilities that might affect your business at that time as far as competition goes? For example, how many of you thought about Zillow Flex 10 years ago? Probably nobody, because it didn't exist. But what's going to happen 2 years from today, 3 years from today? The Zestimate didn't exist a few years ago, and that has some kind of an impact on clients. So what is it that we can anticipate or at least imagine being out there as far as the competition goes? Anybody ever heard of this little company that used to be a big company called Kodak? Arguably the most famous company in the world in the 1900s for 100 years. And after 100 years of success, and arguably the most famous brand name in the world, you could show that yellow and red Kodak sign to somebody in probably any continent of the world, and they would know what it is. And today, where are they? Now, there's probably a lot of reasons why they're not around like they were then. But one question here is, where is the marketplace heading? Where is competition heading? In this case, there was a technological change, moving away from film. Competitors did that. New competitors came into the marketplace. For whatever reason, they're not the company today that they were then. And so if you're going to do some strategic planning, you can consider at least these three things: goals, market conditions, competition. And you could consider doing this on a quarterly basis. Schedule into your calendar a 3-hour meeting with your trusted advisor or your coach or your team or somebody else who you respect to just sit down for 3 hours, set up some questions for yourself. How am I doing on my goals? Where do we think the market might be 12 months from today, 18 months from today, 24 months from today, and why? And what do we think the competition will be doing then compared to now? Anything different, anything similar? What can we anticipate? And then all of this leads to you, how do we respond? If you're not in these conversations from time to time with other people, you're shortchanging your business and you're setting yourself up for the low inventory freakout next time it happens. So preparing ahead of time is every bit as important as what you might do in the moment. So Chirag and I and others on our team be happy to talk with you about how you can do this stuff going forward, but you need to build it into your plan, because if you don't, you're going to be caught flat-footed next time something happens. How do you manage yourself in the moment? All right, so you find yourself, maybe you didn't anticipate things, maybe you tried and you anticipated it wrong, perfectly fine, it's perfectly natural part of business. How do we manage ourselves in the moment? Well, naturally, managing yourselves in the moment is much more focused on how do I get myself through this moment back to some kind of equilibrium so I can stay in the game. Normally what happens to us mentally is when we assess the marketplace or we assess our life in some certain way, it causes this freak out. It's an emotional reaction to what we're experiencing. We recognize risk or danger out there. My business will fall apart, or I'm not making any money, and I can't pay for my food, and I can't pay for my rent, or my relationship with my spouse or my business partner is falling apart. Whatever it is, we anticipate difficulty, and that's when we experience the freak out. It's perfectly natural, and it's part of life. How do we manage ourselves in the moment? There are a lot of things that we can do. Here's some 6 suggestions. First, radical acceptance. This is a psychological term. The psychologist will talk about radical acceptance when you're talking about, let's say, bipolar and other things like that. Radical acceptance is a total and unconditional acceptance of what is. In other words, it's in contrast to wanting things to be another way. We spend a lot of time in strife and strain because we wish things were another way. But the reality is they're not. And so radical acceptance is a way for us to unconditionally surrender. That doesn't mean give up, but simply see what is as what is. In other words, we're not asking our questions like, why is this happening to me? And we're not spending time in statements like, this is so unfair, right? Those are booby prize questions. Those are booby prize statements because there's no answer to them. There's no solution. They don't get us anywhere except in this circle in our head. And for those of us who have a habit of ruminating over things, we'll recognize this in ourselves. We'll spend inordinate amount of time day after day after day when we go to bed, when we wake up, when we have an idle moment thinking, this is so unfair. Why is it happening to me? These things always happen to me. You know, if I had just had a different kind of business, it wouldn't have affected me. Well, you don't have a kind of business, a different kind of business. You have your business. So radical acceptance, if we can do this, helps us get out of this dead-end conversation that we have in our mind about how something should be different. Because it's not different, it may not ever be different, and it doesn't help us respond in the moment. That's radical acceptance. You can look it up online, see what you find about it. Second, have a mantra or an affirmation. Many of us get through the tough moments because we have a particular mantra. One of the famous ones you may have heard is people who work out all the time. Go to the gym, they get tired, it's hard work, it's not easy, you're sore, you'd rather not do it some days. But those folks will often remind themselves these 4 words: no pain, no gain. No pain, no gain. And when they remember that, sometimes that's enough to help them stay in the game, at least for that one particular day. Here are some examples of mantras. This first one comes from Ellen Latham, who's the founder of Orange Theory Fitness. I don't know if you know Orange Theory Fitness. It's a fitness chain like the others. It's growing. And she was talking about her success. And one of the things she said was, I believed in my potential. I believed I deserved it. And I used the mantra, why not me? And that was the tool that helped her get through those rough moments. Why not me? Even though doors were closing in her face, even though the market may not have been an easy one to break into, she kept saying to herself, why not me? I can be successful. I'm the one who can make this work. Some other examples of mantras that people may hold. All I can do is my best. I'm not going to worry about the things I can't achieve here. I'm simply going to do my best, and that's what I can do. I'm not going to break myself for a skill I don't have. I'm not going to break myself for knowledge or experience that I haven't had yet. I'm simply going to do my best with it, and that's all I can do. Or 5 years from now, this won't matter as much as it seems right now. Sometimes one like this, and I'm not suggesting that you use any of these mantras. These are just examples. All right, I'm not saying that any of these are applicable or useful to you. You'll have to find your own that empowers you. But here's one, right? Whatever it is I'm fretting about now, and if you're a parent, this is one that can come in handy, because whatever your problem with the 2-year-old of today, chances are by the time the kid is 10, you'll be long past whatever that worry is. You know, my kid is, 2 weeks behind crawling all the other kids in the class, and my kid isn't potty trained yet. Well, guess what? Most kids, by the time they get to college, they've figured out the potty training thing. It may be a big tempest at that moment, but later on, so sometimes that kind of longer perspective can make a difference. And finally, for folks who are really religious, I've heard this one from folks: God wouldn't give me a challenge I can't handle. While I personally am not particularly a religious person, I recognize the power and strength that this gives to someone when I hear them say it. And so the point here is, having a mantra or an affirmation of some kind is sometimes just what you need to get yourself through that particular moment. Now, an affirmation is different from a mantra. An affirmation is a statement of capability. It's a statement of your strength. It's a statement that is an empowering statement about you and what you can do, what you're capable of, what your skills are, something like that, that's a reminder to you of how you can succeed when things are tough. If you'd like to talk about this offline sometime, we could talk about it, but mantras and affirmations can be a very simple and effective tool if you find the right one. Third, focus on what you can control. One of the biggest problems about situations like this one is you can't control it. You're at the effect, of whatever the marketplace is. In this case, inventory. You can't do anything about it. You can't go out and build 10 million houses. You're stuck. You can't control that part of the business. But there are other things you can control. And very often when we're in a situation where we can't control A, it's very effective to manage ourselves to simply focus on what we can. So maybe you are in the midst of upgrading your social media stuff. Well, that's something you can control. Maybe you need to dive into that right now. Maybe you need to focus your attention on that. Or maybe you need to organize your CRM, and that's something that you can control right now. There are useful things you can do rather than sit there stewing in your freak out. And so sometimes looking around at other parts of your business, saying, what can I control here? What can I do? Is enough to keep you moving. 4, stay in your routine. If the routine is not something that necessarily is wrong for the conditions that you're in, if it's just another routine, like calling people or whatever it is, stay in the routine. The routine is kind of like a security blanket. It's the thing that you can always keep doing to always add value to your business. Regardless of what the situation is today, in a routine, whether it's to work out in the morning, whether it's to make calls to potential clients, whatever it is, practice, objection handling, whatever it is, stay in your routine. It helps you manage through no matter what the circumstances are. And these last 2, these relate to our need for human connection, human interaction in times of need or times of stress. When you're stressed out, when you find yourself crying, or when you find yourself worked up for whatever reason, connect with somebody. Connect with somebody you care about. Send a thank you card to somebody, call somebody up and say, you know what, I was just thinking of you and I miss you and can't wait to see you one of these days. Something like that is enough to sometimes completely shift your mindset, or at least partially shift your mindset. And finally, number 6, ask for help. This is something that many of us don't do enough. We simply deal with the situation as best we can. It's not good enough for us. It doesn't make us feel great. We're not quite making it. We don't reach out for help. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to just call up and say, hey, Josh, you know what? I'm really struggling and I just wanted to share how things are going. Would you mind just listening for 10 minutes? Josh, being a good guy, would say, absolutely, I'm here. What's going on? Sometimes that kind of a thing can be extremely valuable to us. So any of these 6 are things that you can apply. I wonder how many of them you're already applying. Perhaps not all 6, perhaps 1 or 2. I'll take the deck down and I want to ask everybody a question. Okay, question is, what is your go-to strategy for dealing with stressful times like these? What's something that you have found to be successful for you in managing yourself in situations like the great inventory freakout? Let's hear from a couple of people.
Colleen.
Colleen, please.
Hi. So I'm a practicing Buddhist, and I get up and I do a chant like an hour a day in the morning, which is very focusing for me. And when I have like stressful things come up throughout the day, I breathe, and because I do a lot of yoga too, and I just breathe, stay in the moment, or I even just go do a downward dog. And I just say this, this too shall pass. And I just have these mantras like you mentioned that are very helpful, and just staying in the moment is so important because that's all we really have right now.
Got it. Thank you. Being present to what we're experiencing, not just the suffering part of it, but being present to all the other stuff, like we have good health, there's something else that's going on, or we have the opportunity to sit out on the deck and have a cup of coffee or whatever. All of these are effective ways for us to move through. I like Colleen mentioning her routine and sticking with the routine that works for her on a daily basis. One of the reasons that a routine is kind of a security blanket is because it adds an element of predictability and normalcy to our lives. And when we're dealing with something that's unanticipated and difficult, that's injecting something in that we didn't anticipate. And so sometimes having that thing that we can hold on to is something that allows us to kind of smooth out the rough spots. Sarah, did I see you raising your hand?
I did raise my hand. So these were all really great things that you mentioned. One thing that really helps me is to remind myself, and I say this to myself, is that I'm only in control of my own mind, not what's happening around me. I'm only in control of my reaction and my perception. I say that to myself a lot, and that really just kind of puts me in the moment, and you know, makes me realize the world that's going on is really in my head. So that's one thing that I do. Also routine, as well as meditation, which I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people, you know, a lot of people think meditating is like stopping your thoughts, which, you know, is hard to do. But it's like, for me, it's like a lot of visualization and just trying to visualize an outcome, but not having an attachment to that outcome. So yeah, those are the things that I like to do. Also, one more thing I want to say is, I say to myself a lot, don't judge yourself. So when we, like, I also, you know, bidding wars or offers that are not going through or whatever, you know, not to get upset at myself, you know, I don't judge myself in the moment. So, yeah.
Thank you. You know, that's such a common way that we pile on. You know, we've got a difficult situation and we're trying to manage it and we're not successfully managing it. So what do? We turn the spotlight on ourselves and say, boy, did you screw that up? In that case, unfortunately, we're just piling the suffering on top of ourselves. You know, that idea of detachment is such an important piece here, and it's really hard. If you'd like to become better at detachment, read some of the Buddhist authors out there. Maybe Colleen can recommend some. Pema Chodron is one, Pemachhodron, Pema Chodron. She's a Canadian Buddhist. She's written a lot of books on Buddhist principles, not Buddhism per se, but a lot of Buddhist principles. And, you know, it's a big piece of Buddhism, which is this idea around detachment. And some of the great writing out there, in my opinion, on this idea of detachment comes from Buddhist sources.
Yeah,
Thank you. Let's
great.
hear from
Oh, David, just
Colleen. Yeah, please.
Thich
Colleen
Nhat
and then
Hanh.
Greg. Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh is very
Thich Nhat
good.
Hanh, another great one. Sure.
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh, right? Thich Nhat Hanh was Vietnamese. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
Laotian?
Yeah.
Vietnamese. Yeah.
I
When
think
Martin
it is,
Luther King won his Nobel Peace Prize, they asked him, if you hadn't won this, who do you think should have won it? He said Thich Nhat Hanh. So Thich Nhat Hanh is another great writer, written a lot of good stuff. Definitely, I can't believe I left him off. It's Thich, Nhat, I believe, and then Hanh. It's a kind of a strange spelling, but look up Thich, Thich Nhat Hanh. Greg, please.
You know, when you have a couple of situations that don't go your way, you can do some of the things that have been discussed. When more than a year passes and you have 10, 15 deals that each of them have you vested for 3, 4, 5 months, it's easy to fall into a trap of feeling like you have a black cloud over you.
Yes. Yes. You know, one of the kind of truisms of this kind of situation is the longer it lasts, or the more situations that you face and struggle through, you know, create more and more of an experience of, you know, you go beyond disappointment to despair, to you go beyond frustration to hopelessness. And it becomes harder and harder to respond to that stuff, which is commonsensical. If something happens and it's a brief shock, you recover from it. When it becomes more prevalent, when it becomes more permanent, it becomes more and more difficult to do this stuff. And in those situations, Greg, yes, these particular in the moment responses can become less effective over time. Unless it's a mantra or something that is totally right for you and it'll help you withstand anything, it's likely that you'll find it more and more difficult to manage this stuff. And in that particular case, then I don't know that this is the case. I'm just thinking about it now, that the other preparing ahead situations may become relatively more important. Like maybe there's a fundamental shift in the market, or maybe there's a fundamental flaw in the way that I'm approaching the business. Like maybe I should be bigger, or maybe I should be looking at another niche market or something, right? Those are big strategic questions that we don't always ask ourselves. But if we're in a situation where we're experiencing a long struggle or a great deal of struggle, then it may be that we need to make a more radical change to the business. You can certainly see that a sports team that has been in the basement of their league for the last 15 years, maybe they need to do something radically different. And it's really hard to manage that when it's been going on for a long, long time. Thank you, Greg. Be happy to talk with you about that offline if you like. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm really glad we could think about this and talk about this for a few minutes. I would love to have any of you share with us next time we talk or whenever we talk, a win that you've had and what it was that made it, helped you get through that challenging situation. Was it a mantra? Was it a routine? Was it yoga? How do you attribute at least a part of your success to that particular victory? So great talking with everybody this morning, and we'll see you again. Actually, I may not be here next week. I may have to be down in Miami doing some things with some other clients. So I may or may not see you next Thursday. We're still trying to work it out. But if not, anyway, I'll see you all soon, and we're happy to connect offline anytime. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Keep your head.